him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Welcome back to On the Spot. This is Paula Schaffner, and this time I'll be talking about episode 10 of Welcome Back, Kotter, the reunion. They skipped the previous week when it would have fallen on Veterans Day, and so this episode aired on November 18th, 1975. The IMDb synopsis is short. Mr. Kotter dreads an old successful classmate coming to dinner. Bob Alejandro directed as usual, and this was written by George Yannick, whose previous script was for No More Mr. Nice Guy. In the cold opening, the Kotters are in casual weekend clothes with him in a sweater and slacks and her in a turtleneck and jeans. They're playing Parcheesi at the dining table, but as usual is just something for them to do until he tells his joke. This time he asks if he ever told her about the time his Aunt Lucille took driving lessons. When she says she has the feeling that she'll hear all about it, he says he knows that she wants to hear deep inside. His joke is about how Lucille made confusing signals, including one to erase all the signals. Both the Kotters laugh a lot. And then we return to the apartment for the first real scene, and Julie is now in slacks and a sweater, but also a plaid collared shirt. She's smiling while she talks on the phone. She tells the person that 6 will be fine, and she's looking forward to meeting that person and Mary Frances. Gabe exits the bathroom to applause, including cheers. He's wearing a collared shirt, a sweater vest, a tie, and slacks. He goes over to the dining table and drinks orange juice. She calls him honey and says he'll never guess who just called. He says sorry, he doesn't have the time, he's late. She pleads with him to guess. He asks what she's cooking, so she gleefully says her world-famous tuna casserole. In the episode Classroom Marriage, we got the first mention of her tuna casserole, and now it is world-famous. It is now officially a running joke, and we will be hearing more about it later in the episode. He says that the person who called must be nobody that they ever want to see again, because, as you know, he doesn't like her tuna casserole. She puts her hands on her hips, and he smiles a little. She's still smiling, and she says that's very cute. She gives him a hint. She imitates the person on the phone saying, I can't wait to see old Gabe again. He was drinking more orange juice, and he now looks unhappy. He makes her repeat that, which she does gleefully. He says, Lyle Flanagan is coming here, because I guess that's the only person who called him Gabe. She's even happier now. She says that Lyle sounded really nice. Gabe says Lyle was the nicest boy who ever went to Buchanan. He was so nice he would help old ladies cross their legs, which is a variation on helping old ladies cross the street, although it sounds a little perverted. Julie thinks Gabe should be happy since he hasn't seen Lyle in 10 years. And I've talked about this a little bit, that it's unclear exactly how much time has passed since Gabe graduated from school. The earliest episodes it felt like he was 16 10 years ago, but maybe he graduated 10 years ago. Or for some reason he didn't see Lyle the last couple of years of high school. He irritably says, if you haven't seen somebody in 10 years, chances are it's because you don't want to. He angrily says while he was in the bathroom shaving, his wife invited Lyle Flanagan to dinner. Much of the time in this episode, when they say Lyle's name, it's the full name. Julie says that Gabe is mad at her. He angrily walks past her and says he's not mad at her, not acknowledging his anger. He says he just doesn't want to have Lyle Flanagan over for dinner. She's got her back to the camera for most of the next part, and I don't know if this was bad directing or if we were supposed to just focus on Gabe. He says there's nothing wrong with Lyle Flanagan, which is what's wrong with Lyle Flanagan. Lyle Flanagan was perfect, including having no acne. They were on the basketball team together. Lyle would score 30 points per game and not sweat, while Gabe was second string and sat on the bench and sweated, which I thought was interesting in light of what we find out about him playing basketball in the earlier episode, Basket Case. Gabe says the only person who was as bad as Lyle was that Miss Personality cheerleader he used to go out with. Julie guesses that this was Mary Frances, and it's going to be Old Home Week around here tonight. Gabe says he knew they would probably get married. They look so nice, they probably stood on their own wedding cake, like the groom and bride topper on a wedding cake. As Gabe takes his suit jacket out of the closet, Julie says maybe they're not so nice anymore. Like that would be the good thing, that they're not so annoyingly nice. As Gabe puts on his jacket, which doesn't particularly match the rest of his outfit, but I wouldn't blame wardrobe. I think it's just because Gabe is running late. He tells Julie that Lyle Flanagan is not a bad guy. He's not mean or hostile. But throughout school, he always acted superior, probably because he was. Julie asks what Gabe is going to do. He wants her to move while he's at school today. There's applause, including whistles, as he exits. Julie closes the door and we fade to the next scene. We're in the hallway. There's a new white male extra who's in jeans and a gray sweater, and he's looking at a textbook with the main female black extra. The bell rings and they and the other extras go into the classroom. So there's Cap Boy, red-haired boy, and a yellow-shirted white boy who might be new, and yet another female brunette white girl, and I didn't recognize her from before. There's a close-up of a wallet on the floor. Kotter stoops to pick it up, but it disappears. Vinny is watching and grinning in the background. We hear Arnold's distinctive laugh coming from off-screen, so Kotter tells him to get out here. Arnold emerges from the foreground locker area with one hand holding the wallet by a string, and the other muffling his laughter like he's still afraid of giving himself away. Vinny, Juan, Verna Jean, and Freddie emerge from the background locker area, and they're all grinning. The four of them go into the classroom. Arnold thinks he's clever, and he says he thought this gag up this morning. Kotter says not today. Someday they'll discuss the history of the whoopee cushion and the dribble glass. He just doesn't have the patience for Arnold or anyone this morning, and Arnold thought they came up with a prank, but there's no originality to it at all. And the two of them go into the classroom. Kotter greets the whole class as sweat hogs, and I've talked about this before. Sometimes sweat hogs means the main four, and sometimes it's the whole group. He says another day, another dollar, and it's time for book reports, but Vinny asks him about that saying of another day, another dollar. Kotter says in the case of teachers, it comes very close to being a financial statement. This episode could be a commentary on how, still to this day, teachers are underpaid, but it's just sort of a given that they're underpaid. He reminds the class about the book reports, but Juan, who's been reading the newspaper, asks if someone could get rich being a teacher. Kotter says he has enough money to last him for the rest of his life, unless he wants to buy something. Juan says he was thinking about becoming a teacher, which I thought was interesting, especially because very recently he wanted to be a caterer. He says, but if there's not enough bucks in it, why be a sap? He, Vinny, Verna Jean, and Cap Boy laugh. Juan says he might be a street sweeper. The paper says you can make $18,000 a year. The class looks impressed, except Freddie, who looks amused. Kotter takes away the paper and tells Juan to not bring papers into class, meaning newspapers, obviously, since they have term papers and other papers. Kotter reads the ad and says it's in San Francisco where they have all the earthquakes, so they deserve that money because they have to sweep buildings up off the street. I don't know why a New York paper would have an ad for a San Francisco street sweeper, but maybe it was a national recruitment. He closes the paper and tells them to quit stalling. They've got to do the book reports. But Freddie has one last question, and of course it's not the last question for him or anyone. And then he slowly says, Mr. Kotter, what is the meaning of life? Gabe goes into a kung fu routine, the 1972 to 75 drama series that starred David Carradine. This is a show I might have caught a little bit of in syndication. It was slightly before my time, but definitely there were references to it on shows I watched, including Carol Burnett. Mr. Kotter calls Freddie Sweat Hopper, which is a play on Grasshopper, which is what the kung fu teacher called the David Carradine character. And he says the meaning of life is you find Epstein's gym locker, open it, and take one deep breath. If you will survive that, you will survive anything. The kids, including Epstein, are amused, and yes, this is at least the third reference to Epstein's gym locker, which apparently is very smelly, because it's a gym locker and because it's Epstein's. The applause includes whistles, so people appreciate this little routine. It could be seen as racist, but it's not too overdone. There definitely are more racist jokes on the series, unfortunately. Kotter insists on the book reports. Juan volunteers and calls him Master, which is another kung fu reference. At the podium, Juan reads from an orange piece of paper what is basically a TV guide listing for an actual movie, The Arabian Nights from 1942, with that cast of John Hall, etc. Although Epstein pronounces throne as trone because it's a New York accent thing, and the young actor Sabu he calls Cebu. His classmates applaud him, so he takes a bow. He hands Kotter the paper, which looks like it has about 8 handwritten lines. Kotter asks, how is the movie? Because obviously he knows this is a movie, not a book. And again, this thing of Gabe and the Sweat Hogs love to watch The Late Show and see old movies. One says it was wonderful. Cebu and the elephant lived happily ever after. He raises his eyebrows and grins. I don't know if this is a bestiality joke or if he's just being silly. And yes, it's the second episode in a row where Juan jokes about elephants. As Juan returns returns to his seat, Vinny gets up and says he's got his book report. Kotter sarcastically says, "Oh, another surprise." Vinny goes to the podium and rips out a pink piece of paper. And I'm just mentioning the colors of the paper both because they're kind of weird and also because we had so much light blue paper, but I guess that is what they get from the school, and this is their stationery they're buying somewhere that has unusual colors for school paper. Vinny flashes his smile and reads, with pauses to smile again, "Trailer Park Cutie by Miss M, an original nightstand classic." And then he has a quote either from the opening of the book or it could have been the blurb on the back. "Monica knew that one man was too much, yet 10 were not enough." And the class oohs. Kotter says that's enough, Vinny, but Vinny continues, "She woke in the morning, glistening." And he says something about desire, but it was kind of obscured as the class reacts more and Kotter gets out of his chair and comes over to stop him. Kotter says he doesn't care about her glistening. Kotter tells Vinny next time he'll bring a book report in a plain brown wrapper. So obviously this is some sort of trashy pulp novel, not necessarily pornographic, dirty book that Vinny found. As Vinny returns to his seat, the class cheers him again and Freddie high-fives him. Kotter says sometimes he doesn't know why he bothers with "you people," as he calls them, at all. This is an episode where he starts out distancing himself and then he will come around to accepting that he's a sweat hog too. Arnold asks if Kotter doesn't like teaching them. Kotter says he loves teaching. It's his chosen profession, and we just had the episode Mr. Kotter, Teacher. He says, but there are days like today when all he is a straight man for sweat hogs. He might as well have become a door-to-door salesman. So Arnold does his ooh, ooh, and then tells a story about his Uncle Murray, who was a door-to-door salesman of doors. And yes, the name Murray again. He ends the story with his laugh. Kotter looks like he can't take it anymore. The applause includes whistles. Vinny asks what's bugging Kotter. So Kotter says he has a bad case of Lyle Flanagan. Freddie teases, when did you first notice that something was wrong with your Flanagan? And he and the new guy behind him are amused. With one's encouragement, Kotter talks about how Lyle makes $1 million and has 18 secretaries. I don't know if he's exaggerating or if this is something that he's heard from people who know both of them. Arnold again asks if Kotter is unhappy teaching them. Juan says that Kotter didn't have to be a teacher. Freddie says Kotter could have made a whole lot of money. So Kotter tells them about how Heather Weintraub's father wanted him to go into the funeral biz, as Heather called it, but Heather looked like she modeled for the caskets. I didn't quite get that joke. I could see if he's saying that she looked like a corpse, but was she shaped like a coffin? Arnold says he has the distinct impression that Mr. Kotter is not happy. So Gabe sarcastically recounts his day so far, including impersonations of the four main sweat hogs. Although he pronounces it as Mr. Kotter when we all know it's Kotter. Yes, he does Arnold's laugh, and Arnold's laugh is actually sort of a subplot in this episode. Kotter says he has 7 more classes, so that's interesting. I did know that he taught students besides the sweat hogs. I guess that this is homeroom right now. Maybe one of the 7 classes is his afternoon class with the sweat hogs. So we'll see if we ever find out anything more about that or if it's consistent. And he tells them how much he hates tuna casserole, and he refers to Captain No Pimple and his wife Sister Mary Pom Pom, like she's a nun, which will be ironic later. There's applause and a snippet of the theme song as we go to commercial. Then we get a very long scene set in the apartment. Gabe is on the couch with a pillow over his face. It's the same outfit as before, minus the jacket. Julie calls his name and he says he's not here. She asks if he's going to change. The Flanagans are going to be here for dinner any minute. And she's in dark slacks and a brown blouse with blue and gold flowers and her hair on top of her head in a bun. So not super formal, but nice. This must be almost 6 o'clock. So did he just come home from work and throw himself on the couch, take off his jacket, and then nap? I mean, he hasn't done anything for maybe 3 hours. The Flanagans knock and he says he has an idea. He wants Julie to make a very thin sandwich and slide it under the door. So that'll be their dinner. Gabe and Julie playfully throw the throw pillow at each other as she says that they can't do that, can they? And he gets up and says that wouldn't be nice and jokes about that. And they smile cheesily at each other. They go over the door and he sings, "I'm a nice guy." And I don't know if that's an actual song or just something he felt like singing to emphasize his fake niceness. This is an episode where they have people coming over and they go to the door together, which we've seen before. before. He opens the door. A woman in a red hat, red scarf, off-white knee-length dress, and a dark coat with light-colored fur trim stands there beaming. She says, "Gabe Kotter?" And then she does her squeaking laugh, and we will get quite a bit of this. He tells Mary Frances he didn't recognize her without her pom-poms, so she does a move like her fur cuffs or pom-poms. Then she laughs again. Gabe makes introductions, and the two women shake hands. Mary Frances, and she is referred to as Mary Frances, even though IMDb has her just as Mary. Mary Frances says Lyle is still parking his car. He's so fussy about it. She'd hate to tell the Cotters how much it costs. She laughs. Cotter asks if there is a lot of traffic, and then she says $14,500, so obviously she doesn't really hate to tell them, but she's trying not to brag. Gabe says that's a lot of traffic. He and Julie exchange, "Well then," looks like they don't know what to say about this strange woman at their door. Gabe takes Mary Frances's hat and coat. She's amused by the closet sign. She laughs again. Both Gabe and Julie make faces behind her, depending on which way she's facing at that moment. Lyle knocks and lets himself in. He has helmet hair that's graying at the sides, and he definitely doesn't look 26 or 28, more like 40. And instead of looking rich, he's got on a very tacky 70s sports jacket and jeans, although he is wearing a tie. So I don't know if they didn't know how to have a millionaire dress, or they didn't have enough in the budget, or they thought, well, Lyle is going back to the old neighborhood, so he's going to dress down. Mary Frances closes the door for him as he gives Julie a bouquet of red roses and says she's just as pretty as she sounded on the phone. Julie says what a nice thing to say. Gabe says that's my Lyle, meaning, of course, Lyle said something really nice. Lyle claps him on both shoulders, like clapping somebody on the back, but like hitting his shoulders. And he calls Gabe a son of a gun. Mary Frances is beaming again. Gabe asks how Lyle is doing, and Lyle says he's making a bundle, so Gabe tells Julie that old Lyle is in the bundle business. Mary Frances laughs again. Then, as Gabe makes Lyle a drink, Mary Frances goes to Lyle and says it's sweet that Gabe still lives in the old neighborhood. Lyle remembers what this neighborhood is like, which is why he's glad he found a spot right in front of the building. Mary Frances laughs. Lyle tells Gabe that his car eats gas like a bus, and he'd hate to tell Gabe what he paid for it. Mary Frances laughs again, and this time it's because, whoops, I already told him. Although she doesn't say that, but it's implied. Gabe smiles and says $14,500. In surprise, Lyle says, "You've got one too?" Gabe says that the city takes care of his bus. They lock it up at night so they can paint over the graffiti, because it's New York, and of course there's going to be graffiti. Lyle explains to Mary Frances that this is a joke, but for once she doesn't laugh. Lyle says Gabe was always funny. He always had something to say. That's why they called him Gabby Gabe. I don't know who they are. I mean, besides Lyle, maybe Mary Frances, maybe Lyle's friends? Gabe laughs and says he has nothing to say, which is understandable, and what do you say to that? There's a cut to Julie in the kitchen, and I noticed behind her there are 2 jars of relish on the shelf, and they're labeled 1 and 2, and they've got those pointing finger hands like in 1800s typography, and apparently this is called the manicule, and it's a visual device to highlight the important parts of a text, and it has a long history in medieval manuscript illumination, so I just thought it went back to the Victorian era. Interesting. And again, my headcanon is that Julie did this lettering just like I think she did the lettering on the closet that impressed Mary Frances, and also the bags that said bags a while back. Julie looks worried, then she smiles and says dinner will be ready in a few minutes. So again, this is an episode where Julie is playing hostess and trying to smooth things over. And you notice that the times that they have had people, Gabe hasn't particularly wanted anybody to come over. Mr. Woodman and the Sweat Hogs and so on. Mary Frances comes over to Julie and says she'd love a tour of the house. Julie looks confused, and then she says, "This is it." Gabe comes over and gives Mary Frances the tour. And it's a bit like when Rosalie got the tour on Whodunit, only Gabe is both more cheerful and more sarcastic than he was then. He points out the spacious dining room where visiting heads of state have been known not to show up. He says the kitchen was decorated in early Munchkin, so another Wizard of Oz reference, also referring to how tiny the kitchen is. He points out the spacious foyer. He shows his den, which of course is the fire escape, and he points out the window to their trash can out on the street, and it has racing stripes. And then he points to the bedroom, which her husband Lyle is sitting on. Mary Frances says it's the most quaint and charming little apartment she's ever seen. She calls Lyle Lili, so her pet name. She sits next to him on the couch, and she air kisses him, which is a pretty odd thing to do to your husband, but she's odd. She says she can't imagine what they're doing with 5 bedrooms. And again, this is like a humble brag thing. Kotter says he can't imagine what they're doing with 1. There's laughter, applause, and whistles. And of course, he's saying that he can't picture them having sex. Then he has to cover this by saying that he means because Lyle is too busy to sleep. The Flanagans are too square to get this. Julie comes over with the roses now in a vase. She asks if they have any children. And I assume she's just making conversation. And this is a couple that have been together since high school, so much longer than her and Gabe. It's an understandable question. Mary Frances laughs and she says no. So she's not offended. She just thinks it's silly, the idea that she would have children. And Lyle says Mary Frances was always more willing to die than to do anything to mess up her hair. So I don't know if he means having sex or giving birth. Lyle and the Cotters laugh, but Mary Frances slaps Lyle. Not on the face, just like on the chest. But she does a lot of slapping him lightly in this episode. She turns her back on him. Then she points as she notices the 4 main sweat hogs and Bernadine entering through the windows. The applause includes squeals and whistles, and I think that is because the gang is dressed up. They are bearing covered food. Julie calls Gabe honey, as she often does, and asks if he sent out for sweat hog delight. And this is a very 70s joke. I was too young to actually know how much of this existed in reality and what I was just picking up on sitcoms. But like Chicken Delight, it was either a real place or just something I'd heard on television. Basically, food delivery. Vinny is in a blue and white striped jacket, a white collared shirt, a blue tie, and black slacks. He says they heard about her famous tuna casserole. As we know, Kotter was complaining about it in the classroom, but phrased somewhat diplomatically there. Freddie is in a tan jacket, a white collared shirt with maybe black vines on it, and his top buttons are undone, and he's wearing black slacks. He says they didn't want the Cotter's dinner guests going hungry because nobody's going to eat the tuna casserole. Juan is in a red jacket with matching pants and a pink shirt, also with his top buttons undone, so he is characteristically in the loudest outfit of the Sweat Hogs. He says they decided to bring some real food. It's just getting worse and worse, making fun of Julie's cooking. As his friends head over to the kitchen, Arnold, who's in a black bow tie, a rust shirt, tan jacket, and matching slacks, comes closer to the Cotters and says it's a taste of the good life. So he's a nicer guy, and he's going to phrase it in that way. And he says that it's fine food in a gracious setting. And of course, it's not a gracious setting. It's this tiny rundown apartment. Julie is smiling like she thinks Arnold is adorable, which is a common thing for Julie. I think she is very fond of him. But Gabe has his hands on his hips because this is a stressful evening for him already, and now the Sweat Hogs have shown up uninvited. Juan asks Lyle if that's his car parked out there. Lyle says the black one? Yes. Juan says, better get it out of there. A Puerto Rican family is moving in. He grins. And I guess it's this thing where because he's Puerto Rican, he can make jokes about them. Freddie is very amused, but Bernadine has her hands on her hips and an, oh, Juan, be nice look on her face. There's an interesting dynamic happening in the background in this episode, in this scene in particular, where Bernadine is interacting more with Juan than with Freddie. And I don't know how to interpret that. Bernadine is in a blue sort of sailor-style dress with short sleeves, and then she's got a long sleeve lighter blue turtleneck underneath. The Flanagans look worried about the car. There's laughter and applause about what Juan just said. Julie looks like she's trying not to laugh. Gabe tells Lyle that the Sweat Hogs are great kidders. Vinny says they may kid around in class, but they only do it because they like Mr. Kotter. Bernadine agrees and says they don't want to lose him. Freddie says they want him to see he doesn't have to be rich to live big, and he says it kind of grandly. Gabe, who's standing next to Julie and holding hands with her, thanks them. Then the Cotters go over towards the food, which the Sweat Hogs are starting to uncover. She asks where they got all this stuff. He says it looks like the UN cafeteria. Even though they don't know what it is, I guess it looks quote-unquote ethnic in different ways. Vinny explains that they told their folks that Kotter finally, as he puts it, got tired of them and wanted to quit teaching. So their parents sent this stuff over. Bernadine adds that it's gratitude to show how much he means to them, meaning the folks, and to us, meaning the Sweat Hogs. Juan is holding a big white bowl, and he says that his mom said that anyone who can keep her Juan in school deserves her specialty, a Puerto Rican Jewish dish, gefilte mofongo. He grins grins. We saw in one of our Sweat Hogs is Missing that his mother didn't really care that much about Juan running away, but maybe on some level she does recognize that Kotter is an important role model in her son's life and keeping him in town and in school. Mary Frances laughs hard. Arnold, who's still over by the couch, points at her and does his laugh. The audience is understandably delighted. Mary Frances points and laughs back. Arnold laughs a bit more, and then he goes over to Mr. Kotter and says, "She has the dumbest laugh I ever heard." He laughs again. The audience is again delighted. Meanwhile, Freddie is dishing up food with help from Bernadine. Arnold kneels on the couch with one leg, and he puts his head so close to Lyle's it looks like he's going to kiss him. Lyle blinks and smiles nervously. Mary Frances looks taken aback. Arnold asks Lyle if he's really a rich person. So I guess the thing is, Arnold has never seen anybody rich before. Lyle is a curiosity to him. Lyle says that they're well off. Mary Frances slaps Lyle, causing Arnold to fall onto the couch as she says that they are rich. Arnold eases off the couch. Vinny comes over with 2 plates of whatever. He graciously introduces himself as Vinny Barbarino, head sweat hog. We're 10 episodes in and he still sees himself as the head sweat hog. There's whistles from the audience, and I don't know if that's because he called himself the head sweat hog or if he's doing his Vinny thing of, "I will welcome the Cotter's guests like I am their co-host." He gives the Flanagans the plates and sits next to Lyle. He says they probably want to know all about him. Mary Frances says no and offers her plate back. Offended, Vinny gets up and walks away. Lyle tells Mary Frances that these are the new sweat hogs. I don't know if Julie explained about the new sweat hogs on the phone or if Lyle heard from somebody else, because obviously somehow he found out Gabe's phone number, or if he just put 2 and 2 together and these must be the new sweat hogs. Vinny says, yeah, they're the new sweat hogs, what of it? Defiant now, maybe because Mary Frances rejected the food. Gabe tells Lyle that to these kids, being a sweat hog is a badge of honor. And I wondered if in the 60s when Gabe was a sweat hog, it wasn't. Maybe it was more of an insult, although they did name themselves that. Arnold says not everybody can be a sweat hog, as we will see through the next 3.5 years. Freddie puts his arm around Kotter and calls him his main man, as he has before, and he gives him some hip hand slaps. He says Kotter was a sweat hog once. Now he don't want to no more be a sweat hog. No more. So I think in his own way, Freddie is hurt and feels rejected. He is always trying to be cool and not get upset about things. He's not like Arnold, who just wears his emotions and his heart on his sleeve. You can kind of read between the lines that Freddie is hurt by Kotter wanting to quit being a teacher. Kotter tells Freddie that's not true. He tells Lyle that he told the sweat hogs that he was uncomfortable about Lyle's visit. They're his students, but they're also his friends. And this is an episode where Kotter goes to sweat hogs and shares his problems. So it's a reverse of the usual thing of Kotter finding out about their problems. Although in a sense this happened in the previous episode too, where they came to his hearing and spoke on his behalf, most of them. Kotter says he's a sweat hog and he guesses he'll always be one. So again, he's coming around to the thing of he left, he went to college, he changed, and then he came back and he's a teacher, but he's also still a sweat hog. He says you, meaning a sweat hog teacher, don't make a lot of money, but you meet an interesting class of people, and I don't know if that's a pun on the class. He chuckles. He says the Flanagans are welcome to stay, but if they don't want to be around sweat hogs, and Lyle stands and interrupts him. And we've seen that Mary Frances doesn't seem to want to be around sweat hogs, although she's okay visiting Gabe, the former or possibly still present sweat hog. But Lyle sets down his food and he says he knows that Gabe never really liked him very much. Meanwhile, Bernadine has gone over to Juan and she takes one of the 2, I think, sandwiches that he's holding. Gabe denies disliking Lyle, who says he knew it all along, meaning Gabe's dislike of him. But he was grateful that Gabe let him hang around, meaning back in high school. He was and is envious of Gabe. Mary Frances stands, slaps Lyle's shoulder, calls him Lili, and laughs. She doesn't see why Lyle would be jealous of Gabe. Gabe is surprised that a man with a $14,000 car envies him. Lyle says Gabe doesn't know how much he has with his students. Lyle asks what he has. Behind him, Mary Frances looks annoyed and puts her hands on her hips. Lyle says it's not so nice being nice. It's boring. All through school, he wanted to be a sweat hog, but dirt never stuck to him. Mary Frances looks like she can't believe what she's hearing. Lyle says he was too perfect. Mary Frances says it's lovely being perfect, so she's happy with herself, although he's not whatnot. He whirls around saying it's boring being perfect and it's boring being rich, and he has 5 boring bedrooms. Mary Frances puts her hands on her hips again and asks if she's included in those 5 boring bedrooms. He tells her that no one has a headache for 7 years. Freddie and the audience are delighted, and this is the 70s thing, which came up quite a bit on Three's Company, where it was Mr. Roper rather than the usual thing of the wife having a headache as an excuse for not wanting sex. And if they've been together since high school, that's maybe 12 years, so I don't know which 7 years may be the most recent. And it's a pretty personal remark to make in front of a former sort of friend and a bunch of strangers. Mary Frances puts her hand on Lyle's arm, and through gritted teeth she asks him what he's saying. Gabe says that sounds like Sweat Hog talk to him, which pleases Lyle. He's glad that he can talk like a sweat hog. The experts, Vinny and Freddie respectively, say that it was sort of like a rank, and we saw in the pilot that Vinny is the best ranker, stylistic insults in the school. Freddie says it's an A for effort and a C for execution. One has both sandwiches or whatever they are again, and Verna Jean has her hand on his shoulder. One says Lyle is real white bread, but okay, and we know that one of his insults for Todd Ledlow is white bread. Very stereotypically white and wholesome as an insult. Arnold comes over, shakes Lyle's hand, and says, "Congratulations, Mr. Flanagan." There's brief applause. Gabe says Lyle is an honorary sweat hog. He thanks Lyle for making him feel as rich as Lyle is. Lyle says Gabe is richer. Mary Frances says, and Gabe isn't in trouble with the IRS. Then she laughs. Gabe says that was a good one. Mary Frances and Arnold laugh and point at each other again. Gabe tells Mary Frances that she ranked Lyle. Arnold says, "Congratulations, Mrs. Flanagan." She and Arnold shake hands and they laugh together. Lyle asks her how it feels to be a sweat hog, and she tells him, "Up your nose with a rubber hose." The audience is pleased. They don't explain how she knows that insult, because in the pilot it was supposed to be a modern sweat hog insult where insults are directed towards your opponent rather than the opponent's family as it was in the 60s. Then Mary Frances points to her head and is very excited that she just lost her headache. So I guess she and Lyle will go home and have sex? Gabe invites everyone to eat dinner, and they gather food as we go to commercial with the usual applause and snippet of the theme song. In the tag, the Cotters are at the dining table again, this time with a bunch of books. Her hair is still up, but she's now dressed in denim. Gabe is in slacks, a collared shirt, and a sweater vest. So I don't know if she was helping him get ready for school or what. It's not like he's grading homework, which we've seen in other tags or openers. This time his joke is about a little Italian man. To prove that he's Italian, he sings O Sole Mio, like Vinny did in the previous episode. This man liked to barbecue, but a drunk walked by and thought that the steaks were the monkey, as in an Oregon Grinder's monkey, so Italian stereotypes. Both Cotters laugh. I thought this was a good, solid episode. It's not a classic, but I was very entertained. It's a very amiable episode. Not on the level of Yannick's previous episode, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which also gave us some insights into Mr. Woodman, and I would argue was funnier. I grade each of these episodes like in a classroom, so from F- to A+, that was an A-. This one is a B. It's just right where it needs to be, but it didn't wow me. I think it's pretty well constructed. It flows better than the last couple episodes, and there weren't as many uncomfortable moments. And the teamwork is good. I also choose a head of the class, which is not necessarily a student, and it's the character that I most enjoyed watching. And I felt like, although obviously it's a Gabe episode, it's pretty much ensemble work. There weren't really any standouts from the regular cast, so I am going with a guest star. I did not choose Verna Jean, as I did with the previous episode. This is her 4th episode. I like that she gets to do a little bit, but I still felt like they could have done more. You can certainly see her trying to get some attention with whatever's going on with her and Juan in the background. So Vernee Watson certainly is doing a nice job, but it didn't really stand out to me. Michael Taylor played Lyle Flanagan. There is no biography at IMDb, and he has only 4 other roles covering from 75 to 81, so I don't know his age or anything else about him. He was fine. It's a strange character because he's a nice millionaire. He's secretly dissatisfied, and it's probably a little bit hard to play and a little bit hard to direct. He was okay in the episode. I mean, he has his little arc. He helps to reveal a little bit more about Gabe's high school experience, so that was interesting. And I talked about on a previous pod if we ever meet any of the other sweat hogs from Gabe's era, and we don't. But here are two of his classmates. On the other hand, Bridget Hanley as Mary Flanagan just really was riveting. I loved the thing of her laugh, although I could see that might be annoying in real life and possibly to the audience, but I liked how it played off of Arnold, the character's own arc. She's fun to watch, even when she didn't have a line, playing this particular character who is on the surface more satisfied with her life, but obviously if she has had a headache for 7 years, there's some tension and unhappiness there. So I guess visiting the Kotters is a liberating experience. Bridget Hanley was born in 1941 in Minneapolis. She died in 2021. She was married to director-producer E.W. Swackhammer, who directed various dramas and sitcoms, including a few episodes of Gidget, which she guested on, but it was a different episode, and they wouldn't end up marrying until 3 or 4 years later. She also did Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, The Flying Nun, The Odd Couple, 5 episodes of Love American Style, Chips, Mama's Family, and Murder, She Wrote, but her big break was a regular role on Harper Valley PTA in 1981 to 82. I don't remember her specific performances in other roles, but she definitely has a very distinct comedic style, at least here, and that was fun to see that energy brought in. We did not get Mr. Woodman. I don't think there was even a mention of him. That might have been interesting to see what he would say about Kotter tiring of teaching, whether he would just be very cynical about it, whether he would be happy that Kotter would want to quit so soon after Woodman was trying to get him fired for doing Groucho imitations in the classroom. And we get a lot fewer celebrity imitations from Kotter in this episode, but we do have him imitating the class, not for the last time. I think it was nice to see the home life and the school life blend a little bit in a different way, and obviously that gave Julie more to do than just the beginning and end of the episode. We don't know how long Kotter has been teaching, but it's been a few months, and I guess everything was kind of getting to him already. And then Lyle shows up and he starts questioning his life. And I do find it interesting that the Sweat Hog's parents, presumably the mothers, although not necessarily, all chipped in with various kinds of food, which we don't know beyond Mrs. Epstein what they actually made. Presumably Mrs. Barbarino did something stereotypically Italian. We still don't know why Verna Jean's family did not move to Staten Island, but apparently they appreciate Mr. Kotter too, and I don't know if they ever found out that their daughter almost married Freddie, but Kotter convinced them to not go through with that. The costumes were nice, although they weren't as crazy as in the previous episode, but the wardrobe was interesting. Obviously, we will not see the Flanagans again. They brought a certain something, her in particular, to this mid-season episode. Next time, I will be looking at Barbarino's Girl, which, spoiler, means that we will have a different look at Judy Borden. In the meantime, have a nice but not boring day.
Tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back.